Ahoy! Some of you may have heard of Palia before, and if you haven't, I will change that today, and I started following this game very early on. That led to some awesome opportunities that allowed me to talk directly to the devs, get an introduction to the game itself, and also now be allowed to share some of the early gameplay with you where I can show off the late game content that the game currently has. What is Palia? The team describes it on their website as a cozy sim MMO that takes a lot of inspiration from community sims, but also wants to be an MMO. It is free to play and is instead monetized via customizations that you can buy in the game, via cosmetics in general, so especially via outfits. We get back to the question what defines Palia as an MMO a little bit later. First I want to talk about some other aspects. When it comes to the graphics, what you can see speaks for itself. You're not going to see anything groundbreaking here, but the visuals definitely look nice for a cozy game especially, and they're very fitting as well. The art style is very suitable for the overall vibe of the game, so overall I'm very happy with how the graphics have been implemented here. I also wouldn't be surprised to see some graphical improvements down the line anyway, some shader improvements maybe, because the game was still in alpha. The game's performance was also surprisingly good. I played the game on NA server, so I had significant ping, and again, this was a game that was still in alpha. I've had many bad experiences with games, especially that I had to play on NA, that were in the same stage of their development cycle, especially recently, so this was a very pleasant surprise. When it comes to the overall gameplay, the general flow of the game feels good, and the progression is mostly straightforward. There were a few situations where I felt like progression was halted a little bit too much, for example by requiring things from other parts of progression that kind of stopped you from going on. But when I talked to the devs, I provided feedback on exactly those things, so they may no longer exist now anyways. In terms of pace, the game doesn't really force you to do anything, and it's very rare that you're required to do anything in the first place. For example, there are many activities that you can outright skip if you just don't feel like doing them. Except for a few points where they're somewhat interlinked, you can choose if you want to progress with the quest line, if you want to build up your house, or if you want to talk to the villagers instead. You can also choose to do none of that and go fishing. In other words, Palia is very sandboxy. The game's controls are smooth and intuitive, with one notable exception. Gathering activities are currently a bit tedious due to how often you need to swap your equipped item in order to do different gathering activities. The devs had some ideas for that though, so I think we'll see improvements to that sooner or later. Custom key bindings are available, something that I think is very important when it comes to accessibility. Currently they don't allow you to use certain keys, so it's a little bit restrictive in which one you can choose for interactions. There are various different activities that you can do in the game. First of all, there's the main quest line. Progressing here requires you to interact with various NPCs, solve certain puzzles, craft certain things that allow you to progress, and maybe other things in the future that I haven't found out yet because I haven't fully completed it. Another very major aspect are your relationships with different NPCs. You can build friendships with various NPCs in town, and you can also romance some of them. There's an entire progression system for this, so I would imagine, especially for completionists, there's quite a fair bit to do here. Before we talk about other activities in the game, I'd like to ask you for a huge favor. If you're interested in Palia, then please subscribe to my other channel, which is specifically about Palia and Palia only for now. Subscribing will not only help that channel get on its feet, but also tell me how many of you are actually interested in this. There's a link in the cards, so in the top right corner, as well as in the description. Thanks a ton if you're taking this extra step. Now back to the activities. There is no combat in Palia insofar that there are no enemies who actually fight back, but you're still shooting some animals with a weapon, so you can argue if that counts as combat. The activity in question is hunting, where you hunt animals with a bow. There's not much to explain here. If you ever used a bow in any video game before, you know how this works. You shoot at the enemy, sometimes multiple times if they're strong enough, and eventually they die, and you can pick up the loot. What is unique is that you're on a timer. The animals start running away, and after a certain time they will disappear, for example go underground, so you have to hit them often enough and quickly enough. Apparently hunting won't be a necessity though, if you'd rather trade the resources from other players. Bug catching is another activity that is fairly similar. In this case you're throwing little bombs at bugs, and then they get stunned and you can pick them up. On the more traditional side we have foraging, which includes logging, so this is mostly chopping trees and collecting branches, anything that contributes to building your house and various things later on. And in a similar vein, pun intended, we have mining as well, so you can gather various rocks and metals across the world. What I will say with these activities is that so far they feel somewhat basic. That makes sense because they are basic gathering activities, but they're also a part of the core gameplay loop, so they have to be somewhat engaging since you will likely be repeating them a fair bit in order to build your house. The next activities are the ones that I found more engaging. Fishing is a fairly interactive minigame. You have to slowly reel in the fish, but you also have to watch out that the fish doesn't move out of the targeter, because if that happens for too long, your fish could get away, the line could snap. In the beginning, this is fairly simple, but later on you can start using rarer bait, and with a rarer bait come better fish that are also more challenging to catch. Similarly, cooking starts out very simple as well, with a basic campfire. But eventually you can upgrade to a kitchen, and in that kitchen you can then craft full-on recipes. This can go as far as involving other players, and you can cook more complex recipes together and everyone does different steps at the same time. Again, an engaging minigame. Not all parts of this minigame felt equally fleshed out. Some require to do things with precise timings, while others are just holding a button so far, but that is something that can easily be built upon. Of course, no cozy game would be complete without gardening or farming. This is where Palia reaches a new level of complexity. On the most basic level, you drag your hoe through a field, you plant some seeds, you water them, and you rip out some weeds, and you'll get some results. However, if you want to optimize things, you can go well beyond that. Planting different plants near each other will provide the others with specific benefits, so you can kind of stack those on top of each other and prevent certain things from happening to nearby plants and so on. And you can then further optimize that by using fertilizer. But not every plant grows equally fast, and some need to be replanted, while others like trees will stay even after they've been harvested, so there's a lot more planning that can be involved here if you want to. Since this is an MMO, time continues to progress while you are not playing, but that doesn't mean that your plants will die if you log out. Instead, they will pause their growth progression until you water them again. For more details on gardening, I'll have a guide on my new channel. There are some other ways to make resources as well. For example, you can refine resources, you can pickle resources, you can make fertilizer, all kinds of things, and most of them take time. You have to place certain things in specific machines and wait for them to do their job. With some of those refined resources, like for example wood, you can then make other things as well, like furniture. You can make money by selling crafted things, and this also includes cooked food, for example. Higher quality products result in more gold that can then be used for building and house decoration. According to the devs, early on you earn somewhere between 100 to 1000 gold per day, whereas later on, if you really grind, you can get close to 10,000 gold per day. But not all decorations for your house can be bought with gold. Others require activity tokens instead, which require you to do the corresponding activity. So for example, for some housing items from the foraging vendor, you need foraging medals. And let me tell you, based on the number of medals some of these things need, that is absolutely late game stuff. So as you can see, there are quite a few different things to do, though not all of them are currently reaching the same level of depth. While it's debatable if this counts as an activity, I also want to point out that you're able to change your character's appearance whenever you like. I guess this can be an activity depending on how much time you want to spend on it, but either way it's definitely a nice feature to have. Now at this point I want to go back to a question from the beginning. I asked the devs if they see Palia as an MMO, and that kind of led to a conversation what even defines an MMO. In particular, where does the massively aspect from massively multiplayer online game come in? Is it having many players in one area at the same time? That's not the case in Palia. Is it having a large area to explore? That is also not the case in Palia. The world is relatively small, even though they may add on to it in the future. Is it the general opportunity to come across a lot of other players? In that case, it probably would qualify more as an MMO. I saw very similar discussions about Diablo 4 and if that qualifies as an MMO, and I've seen things like that in the past, like for example for Destiny 2, so I'm just gonna tell you what the situation in Palia is. If you're familiar with MMO concepts, Palia is using a shard system or an instanced system, where a certain group of players is together and can interact with each other directly, and then there are other players that are not on that same shard, but are still able to connect with it if they intend to do so. So for example, you will be able to join your friends on their shards. When I had my conversation with the devs, the plan was to have around 25 players on a shard. The reason that they've also repeated on their website now is that they want to maintain a certain village feeling with the area that you're in, and that doesn't really make sense if there are hundreds of players in the same area. But your interactions with friends go beyond just joining their servers. Other players can join your house, and if you give them permission to do so, they can also modify your house, so you can have them help you build things. They can also join you for other activities like cooking. You can both interact with resources together, but you can't strip areas of resources for other players. There are certain mechanics in place that prevent you from taking away stuff for other players. You can also interact with strangers, for example by putting out an item request that anyone on your server can fulfill. Progression in the game is mostly horizontal, so you can always join your friends for activities. If 25 player shards sound too small for you, I have some further information here. They say that as we open up our world in the future, there might be new areas which will feel more densely populated and teeming with people, such as a bustling main city or a busy port town. In other words, the player number per shard may not be 25 forever. All in all, I enjoyed my time in Palia so far and I'm looking forward to what the future brings, but I will also say that it does feel like it's very much in its early beginnings, and the devs express as much in their blogs as well. The game is in a closed beta as of today and will be going into open beta on the 10th of August, but the emphasis is really on beta here. This is essentially an early access. That said, there will be no more wipes and all your progress from this point onward will carry over, even though the progress is mostly horizontal anyways. By the way, if you want to check it out, feel free to use my referral link. Both of us get some cosmetics in return in-game. This is not sponsored, by the way. But all this said, there's one very major concern that I have for the long-term success of Palia. And that is big enough of a concern to deserve its own video, so that is something I'll probably be posting tomorrow. Again, most other Palia-specific videos will be posted on my Palia channel. So if you're very interested in the game, make sure to head over there and subscribe there instead of here. It'll be linked right here on the screen as well. Thanks to the Palia team for giving me the opportunity to try out their game early on. Thanks to my patrons for supporting this video. And thank you for watching. SLOTH out.